that it's, a number of us standing together, to show our support for the Palestinian people. Would you like to stand here? Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming here today on this important afternoon. We are here because we feel compelled to respond to President Trump's so-called deal of the century, which I like to call the shame of the century. And so, we are joined together. Here with me are my esteemed colleagues representing various organizations and communities. And so for the format today, I would like each one of them to introduce themselves, and then I'll say a few comments and invite any of my colleagues to come as well here to the podium and say a few words. And then we will open it up for questions and answers. And so if we can start with Jamal.
Giovanna Lucia with American Muslims for Palestine.
Najat Arafat Khalil with United States Palestinian Council.
Raed Salah with the Holy Land Christian Ecumenical Foundation.
Of the Mighty Rabbi Yisrael David Weiss of Neturei Karta International Jews United Against Zionism.
Sean Blackmon with the Answer Coalition.
Omar Badar with the Arab American Institute.
Sammy Cah with the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee.
Thank you all for being here today, and so let me start. I decided that I'm going to read the entire document, 188 pages, with an open mind. And it's divided into two parts, the political part and the economic part. And I read it twice, very carefully, because I was thinking, how bad could it be? Isn't there anything in there that I can cling on to that is a symbol of hope that maybe we can work with? And in all honesty, there is nothing in there that the Palestinian people can support. And let me explain. From the beginning, Israel gets to annex 30% of the occupied territories. What do the Palestinians get? No sovereignty over all of East Jerusalem, no control over the entire territory, no control of the airspace, no right of return for the Palestinian people, and the security is going to be controlled by Israel. And so in essence, there's nothing in there for the Palestinian people. And on top of that, they imposed conditions that the Palestinian leadership cannot possibly fulfill. And just to give you two examples. One is that in the document, it states that if and when the Palestinians and Israelis sign an agreement, then this notion of Palestinian refugees will cease to exist. No Palestinian leader in his right mind can possibly just completely abolish millions of Palestinian refugees. Another condition that I read is that even in the textbooks, the Palestinians have to change the textbooks, that in the textbooks are not allowed to have anything in there that can be considered to be belligerent to Israel. For example, the Nakba, which is catastrophe, the Palestinians have suffered at the hands of the Israelis. Well, if they include that in the textbooks, Israel can say, you did not fill the condition to achieve statehood. And I can go on about these conditions that is really impossible to achieve. And that's really the problem here. They are making it so difficult for the Palestinians to agree to this agreement. And in effect, they are establishing an apartheid system. And if some point there's a person who asks Israel, why are you an apartheid state? they're going to say, well, it's the fault of the Palestinians. They rejected President Trump's so-called deal of the century. And this is the MO, the theme that Israel has been using for so many years. You blame the Palestinians for everything, you blame the victims, and this is simply not going to be acceptable. Now, for the PLO to participate in this so-called process, there are also conditions that during the negotiation process that the PLO is not allowed to join any international organizations unless Israel approves the request by the PLO to join these international organizations. So it's clearly one-sided. And on the Israeli side, what are the conditions on Israel's side? What are the penalties? Let us assume that the Palestinian people are going to move forward and support this agreement, and they are achieving the conditions to establish a Palestinian state. What if Israel reneges on the agreement? Who's going to hold Israel accountable? What are the penalties for Israel? We have seen the history of Israel when it comes to agreements, starting with the Oslo Agreement, and agreements after that, where Israel continues to violate these agreements. So in the document, there is absolutely nothing to hold Israel accountable to this agreement. The Palestinian people have really suffered for over 70 years, and they remain steadfast, and they've never given up on their fundamental rights, because these are human rights. And no president, no prime minister will ever enable them or will ever force them to relinquish their fundamental rights. I do want to say a message to the American Jewish community. You belong to a great faith and culture. You have been leaders in the civil rights movement, in the anti-apartheid movement, and many of you are also supporting the movement for Palestinian rights. And for that, we deeply, deeply thank you. Some of you continue to be influenced by the rhetoric of fear and hatred, and I kindly ask you to please join us. Join us in the effort to bring about peace and justice for the Palestinian people, and to support a process that will bring about real peace, where both Palestinians and Israelis can work together for their mutual benefit. There's a lot to say about this proposal, and I don't want to take too much time for my colleagues. I know some of them have to leave soon, and so I would like to open it up for Omar, if you would like to say a few comments, and then Samir.
If you wouldn't mind saying your name into the microphone, just because when you said it all, it was hard to pick up.
More than happy to. My name is Omar Badar, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Arab American Institute. The proposal that Donald Trump has put forward is so grotesque and preposterous that it really cannot be described as a peace deal at all. It's not only a misnomer to call it a peace deal, it is flat out Orwellian, because it could never lead to peace, and it's not even a deal because the Palestinians are never going to sign it. What really is being proposed and put forward is an apartheid plan. If you look at the map that came with the deal, you'll see that Palestinians are confined to very small pieces of land, entirely encircled by Israel. So Israel is to the north of Palestine, south, east, and west. And that basically means that Palestinians are a besieged population under the complete and total control of Israel. And that is, by no stretch can it ever be described as a state. The only people who would accept a vision like this are people who do not accept that Palestinians are equal human beings who deserve the same rights and freedom that Israelis are entitled to and that everybody else around the world enjoys. And therefore, nobody should be able to take this kind of proposal seriously. And I think it's worth noting, by the way, that this proposal was Netanyahu's plan all along. As back as the 1990s, more than 20 years ago, a person by the name of David Bar Ilan, who was a spokesperson for Benjamin Netanyahu, said that the plan was to give Palestinians tiny pieces of land, that they can call it a state if they want to, we don't object to that, or they can call it fried chicken if they want to, no problem with that either. Those were his words. And it really is a shame to see, I mean, when you think about sort of the infantilization of Palestinians, that all they want is a piece of land to stick a flag on and call a state, and that it could be a make-believe state and that's fine. That is deeply entrenched racism. That's the only way you can ever imagine that Palestinians would accept something of that sort. And to see this become America's policy is extremely troubling. You know, with every president of the United States, there is a balancing act to be had between what is personally beneficial to them as a president, politically, what is good for the country, for the United States, and then what is right to do on the world stage. And this balancing act doesn't always get carried out in the right way. A lot of presidents make the wrong calculus. But what is unique about Donald Trump is that his only concern is what is beneficial to him personally on a political level, to the exclusion of every other concern and every other consideration. They're simply just not in the picture at all. And in this case, we know this plan is not good for the United States. It's not good for the world community to see the US endorse such grotesque and blatant violations of international law. It's not good for US strategic standing in the region, for the US to be seen as an endorser of Israeli aggression against the Palestinians. It's obviously not good for Palestinians who are the immediate victims of this, but it's also not good for the Israelis on the long term either. Because any US policy that perpetuates the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians is not good for either Israelis or Palestinians in the long term. And the reason why this became American policy is exclusively, the only people that this is good for are Donald Trump personally and Benjamin Netanyahu, two people who are running into elections to the backdrop of facing corruption charges, one facing impeachment. And their calculus is that this is going to appeal to their far-right political base that has basically has complete disregard for Palestinian human rights. And so the question is, where do we go from here? What is the next move? I think when we find ourselves in this moment where this administration has violated everything that Americans hold dear, their most basic values that we profess and we advocate for, it is time to introduce accountability. And I think that this accountability, when you see Benjamin Netanyahu talking about wanting to carry out this annexation in practice by the end of the week, it is really time for Congress to act. It is time for every other candidate running for president to make it absolutely clear that it is now time to condition US military aid to Israel on Israel changing its behavior. As long as Israel moves in this direction, they should not receive another penny from the United States. That military aid should be suspended. Our money is being used to carry out war crimes and crimes against humanity. This is not what we want our money to be moving towards, and it's time for that accountability to happen. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Sammy Cah. I'm the president of the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee. I'm going to try to keep my remarks short here. Yesterday, Donald Trump announced his so-called deal of the century, or what everybody else is giving different names to. I like to call this deal of the century. This plan, according to Donald Trump, is supposed to bring peace and prosperity to both Israel and Palestine. What this plan does is brings continued oppression for the Palestinian people, and it gives Israel a way of continuing the occupation without calling it the occupation, to continue the oppression of the Palestinian people, at the same time washing its hands of any financial burden or any human rights burden that it may have. I believe that President Trump described it best during his press conference when he turned to his negotiating team and he said, "These are men who love America and love Israel." End of quote. For this is what the plan is. It is 100% and totally a plan that benefits only one side. This is not a peace plan or peace deal between Israel and Palestine. It is a peace deal between Israel and the United States, or even more apt, a peace deal between Israel and Donald Trump. The Palestinian people were ignored throughout the press conference, were ignored throughout the process, and are ignored basically through this deal. It gives them boostans, as other speakers have said earlier, little enclaves where they can live and do whatever you want in those enclaves. But Israel will control ingress and egress. Israel will control the airspace. Israel will control what gets in or what gets out. Israel will control what committees the Palestinians may or may not join. Essentially, Israel will control the fate of the Palestinian people in perpetuity according to this plan. If anyone had any questions or doubt that Israel was an apartheid nation, Exhibit 1 would be the map that comes with this peace plan. The peace plan, this map is almost identical to the maps of South Africa during the apartheid era. No changes. Flyby routes, tunnels, so that Israelis will never ever have to look or see a Palestinian again as they travel in and out of their homes going to the rest of Israel. Total and absolute separation, total and absolute oppression of a people. A Palestine being totally subordinate to an Israel. That, I say, should never be allowed to happen. And we call upon all the peace-loving people of this world, of the Europeans, of other Muslim countries, of Asia, of Africa, to stand up and say enough is enough. Enough is enough. No more. Thank you very much.
Yes, please go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Sean Blackmon, and I'm here on behalf of the Answer Coalition, which means Act Now to Stop War and End Racism. And on behalf of the Answer Coalition, I want to join with all of you and people of conscience worldwide who are standing together to condemn Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu's so-called peace deal. Let us be clear. This is not a peace deal. This is a declaration that apartheid is now the official policy of the Israeli government and the US government as it pertains to the Palestinian people. Apartheid, racism, and colonialism are the polar opposites of peace. We feel that peace is not simply the absence of war. Peace requires justice. The irony of this fraudulent peace deal is that it so clearly exposes the anti-democratic, colonial, racist, and apartheid character of the Israeli state that it will lead to the increasing isolation of the Israeli government and its backers in Washington. 30 years ago, the people of the world stood together to boycott the racist apartheid regime in South Africa. The power of a global people's movement ultimately made the difference. It is the steadfast resistance of those who live under occupation and apartheid, coupled with a global movement of solidarity that will defeat apartheid. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. We in the Answer Coalition join with you in this quest for justice, working together, educating people about the truth, and mobilizing a global movement to reject apartheid will ultimately lead to the victorious embrace of genuine self-determination for the long-suffering people of Palestine. Thank you.
With the help of the Almighty, my name is Rabbi Yisrael David Weiss of Neturei Karta, Jews United Against Zionism. First, as a Jew, because of our religion, as our religion demands of us, we have to be loyal citizens in every country we reside. Since the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago, we were given a command by the Almighty that we have to pray for the well-being of the countries we reside in, pray for the leaders of the country, approach with respect In the times of the Pharaoh in Egypt, the Jewish Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, our Rabbi Moses, approached Pharaoh with respect, even though he enslaved the Jewish people for they were 210 years enslaved. So therefore, this is part of a very important issue. Before I had to preface this with my comments, we are approaching our president, the President of the United States, with respect and pleading with him that although many of the politicians, the leaders of the Democrats, the Republicans, and he himself, they are putting a lot of effort to bring peace, a true peace. He said that that evaded the approach from so many presidents and so forth, that they're looking for something. They may very well mean well, but we want to explain that this is the core issue here is a fundamental mistake. In order to diagnose and to provide a remedy, a doctor must have the proper diagnosis, or else it's futile. In this case, the diagnosis that the president is giving and that they're trying to explain is that there is a religious conflict. You're anti-Semitic if you oppose Zionism, the state of Israel, and there's a core hate between Jews and Muslims. They couldn't live together. We have many, on NKUSA, many thousands of pictures how Jews live together in total harmony for hundreds of years without any United Nations or human rights groups. And there's nothing to do with a religious conflict. I have a rabbi here who's generations from the Holy Land. They lived in peace. They lived in total harmony in the same courtyards and babysat each other's children. When they made this deal of the century, is subconsciously this is stating that the victims is a villain, that the Palestinian people cannot live in freedom and be in a free Palestine and be able to live with the Jews, that the Jews should be safe. That is patently wrong. History shows that that is false. What is true is that a new movement called Zionism, a political movement, started a little over 100 years ago and breached the walls of Jerusalem. They came in from Europe with the concept of transforming our religion, which is to be subservient to God, a religion of 3,000 years, and they're transforming it into a nationalism to have a piece of land. And what did the rabbis, the leaders, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our rabbi, is the leader of Judaism. The leaders at that time stood up. Rabbi Zedek, who was the chief rabbi of Palestine, Rabbi Dushinsky, and he pleaded with the United Nations in the United Nations documents, and he stayed. We furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine, because to have a state is antithetical, is forbidden for Jews since the destruction of the temple, and to oppress another people is forbidden for us. Certainly we're not allowed to steal or kill. So by taking this type of a Judaism, they've created bloodbaths and an endless river of hate and all these different plans. The Y Accord, the Camp David Accord is futile. Why? Because you're trying to push a square into a round hole. You're trying to, you've misdiagnosed what the problem is. It's not a religious conflict. It's a confiscation of the people's property, of the homes, their lives, of the Palestinian people, and mind you, of the Jewish people. It is essential to understand that my brethren in Palestine, in Jerusalem, in Al-Quds, are being brutally beaten. Children, older men, and we've never raised a gun. It's over 70 years of the state, so they can't accuse us like they're accusing the Palestinian people of being militant or dangerous. Yet we're being brutally beaten and arrested. Girls, everybody who turns the age of 17, a boy or a girl is a criminal because they don't refuse their conscientious objections. They refuse to serve in this army, which is a rebellion against God. The creation of a state of Israel is a creation of an illegitimate, unacceptable entity on the heads and shoulders of the indigenous people, both the Palestinian, the Arab, the Christian, the Muslim, and the Jewish people. Until today, our communities in the thousands and tens of thousands stand up and demonstrate and say, this is wrong. You simply have a political agenda, a political ideology that's mere 100-odd years, and you're trying to put this in and apply this into the community over here, which is unacceptable, and therefore you can't find the solution. The solution is the removal of this enforced occupation of another people, then we can have peace. The world doesn't know, and I'll be finishing with the fact that we have tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people standing in the streets of Jerusalem, standing in the streets and throughout the world. We plead with President Trump, he should go to his backyard in Brooklyn, Williamsburg, right across Manhattan, the largest enclave of religious Jews, and there's not one Israeli flag, the most religious community. Why? Because our religion is a religion to be subservient to God, not to occupy. It is unacceptable, and unfortunately, the deal of the century, we're thankful that they want to help the Jewish people, but the deal of the century does just the opposite. It's going to continue vilifying to a larger degree the Palestinian people and bring more hate and discord and a rift between Jews and Muslims. The solution is, please respect the rabbinical authorities, respect the Jewish leaders to what means a Jewish. It's not a Jewish state, it's a Zionist state, it's unacceptable, and if you will respect your constituents, the people who are the rabbinical authorities and in Jerusalem, not their rabbinate and chief rabbi of the facade of Israel, but the true chief rabbi and rabbinate of the Jewish people that are residing in Jerusalem, then we can have a peace. It's not so elusive, because the peace is what we live together in peace and harmony, Palestinians and Jews in all the Arab lands. It's not such a big problem. Remove a flawed, political, selfish movement that is for a certain amount of people. This statement of the deal of the century is unfortunately, again, vilifying the Palestinians. We are pleading with our leadership. What Netanyahu stands there and refers to the Torah is a tremendous evil, because he's using our godliness, our Torah, and our suffering of the Holocaust. My grandparents died in Auschwitz, almost all our relatives. They're using our suffering and our religion to legitimize an illegitimate and evil concept. It's not right. We have to turn and stand up, and we plead with our congressmen, with our leaders, stand up, step back, and don't be intimidated. Hear the voices of the Jewish people, and we can remove this problem by removing speedily and peacefully the occupation. There will be true peace. You won't need tunnels. You won't need walls. History attests to that, and the leadership of the Palestinian people in the Arab world. We traveled around the world. We met with all the leaders with God's help. They all stress, and the people of Gaza. We went to visit the Gaza, the prison camps and the orphanages. Everybody embraces us. They say we want to live together because we were together, and we are all godly creations. God should help that the world should come to this realization, and we should have a true peace soon in our days. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Hello, my name is Najat Arafat Khalil. I represent the United States Palestinian Council, USPC. I don't know how much I can add to all what you heard from my colleagues, and the situation we are all passing through, reading or trying to read this deal of the century. I really, hats off for you if you were able to read the whole thing. I got sick to my stomach just listening to some of the ways this solution was offered, and the degradation of the Palestinian people, of all these sentences, oh, they never miss a chance to miss a chance. This is totally, totally unacceptable, and the way it is put together. It's just enclaves of Palestinians surrounded just like in an open air prison, the way it is in Gaza, but now on a smaller scales, and nothing that they can do that is in their hands. If they want to leave, if they want to come, travel, if they want to do anything, they have to be under control. This is totally shameful, and to a point even ridiculous. You know, you could sit and laugh out of really desperation of who do they think the people are? They are talking to idiots? Are they taken to somebody with no brains that they would accept such a deal? I mean, no human being with full capacity would accept something like that, because it is totally shameful. And then to have the two guys who are under investigation, trying to be the heroes of the century of doing such a big, while it is only playing to their constituents, to their people who believe in such idiocracy. So totally just to help them win the next election. This is really totally unacceptable, and I don't know where the conscience of such people, when they feel that the future of a whole nation is dependent on if they win or lose a vote in an election. It is totally shameful and totally unacceptable. And I will leave the floor for the rest of my colleagues.
My name is Raed Salah. I'm with the Holy Land Christian Ecumenical Foundation, which I'm a Palestinian Christian. My colleagues covered a lot of the issues of this deal, and we are here to make sure that to understand the Americans, the Christian Americans, that's how much they are hurting the Christians in the Holy Land. This is a catastrophe. This is the second catastrophe we're going to face. You forced us out as Palestinians. We were 20% in 1948, now we are less than 1%. You have done hurting us because of politics. I don't understand since when Christians mix politics with religion. The Christian faith was saved by Palestinians for last 2,000 years. First started, since Jesus came to the Holy Land, we saved the Christianity. All Palestinians saved the Christianity, not only Christian, because Islam came in the 7th century. And after that, the Muslim supported the Christian in keeping the presence of Christianity in the Holy Land. I ask you, American Christian, to stop that nonsense, because we are not here to talk politics. We are here that we shouldn't lose our Christians' faith in the Holy Land by supporting others, by supporting the Israelis, by involving in politics. All what I'm saying here, let's all work for peace and justice. Let's all change the waves, and let's make peace by having just peace for all. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Giovanna Lucia. I'm with American Muslims for Palestine. I don't know if I can really add. I support everything that's been said. This is not a peace plan. This is a plan for apartheid. And it is a plan that has been designed by the right wing of the Israeli political system. And it leaves the Palestinians as an oppressed and people into slavery. I'm Palestinian American, and I'm very proud of my heritage. And when I see this plan, I think of my father's village, which is in the heart of the West Bank, very small village. And one of the enclaves, if you look at the map in the plan, is called a Tirit. And a Tirit is one of the villages that has taken most of the land of my father's village, most farmland, which makes the people impossible to be able to have a living as they had for centuries. And one of the things that divides the village is a road, Jewish-only road, that goes between a Tirit and another village called Halamish. And if you look at this plan, that road will not disappear. And there are settlements all within this so-called Palestinian statelet. And there are roads that connect it, these Jewish-only roads. So it's impossible to call this a state. As I said, I'm Palestinian American. As an American, I'm going to work with my other supporters of my group across the country to fight this plan, to make sure we are mobilized, to go up on the Hill and talk to those representatives and senators that are sympathetic to our cause. So we will also be working in coalition with other groups. So this is not over. We will continue to fight the good fight. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for being here today, and I just want to make a few final comments. So where do we go from here? We have spoken our opinion about the so-called deal of the century. This is the time for us to politically mobilize. We need to join together. I'm so proud that there are 38 organizations that signed on to the statement that we circulated to the press. This is the time for us to leave today, join together, politically mobilized to change the political landscape in the United States. The issue of Palestine must be an issue in presidential politics, in congressional politics, and even local politics. We cannot free Palestine until we free the American people from the Zionist lobby, and that's going to come soon. I promise you, that's going to come soon. Thank you very much for being here today, and we'll open up for questions.